There are two kinds of maps we carry. The first kind tells you where you are. Longitude and latitude, street names and highway exits, the clean geometry of a world that pretends to make sense. The second kind tells you where you've been, not in miles, but in moments, not in coordinates, but in the crooked path between who you were and who you're becoming. These maps have no legend, no scale. Their terrain shifts with memory. Their destinations have names like reconciliation, acceptance, the place where you finally let go. In a narrow shop, on a street the city planners keep forgetting to update, behind a door most people walk past without really noticing, Samuel Cartwright has been drawing the second kind for 48 years. In all that time, not one of his maps has helped anyone find a destination they could point to on a globe. This is the story of the last customer who walked through his door, and the map that saved them both. Morning arrived in the old quarter through fog, tentatively, as if unsure whether the day deserved to begin. Samuel Cartwright unlocked the door to his shop at precisely 8:47 a.m., the same time he'd done so every morning for nearly half a century. The brass key turned in the lock with a sound like a sigh. He was 69 years old, with silver hair that had long since stopped pretending otherwise, and hands that remained steady despite the decades. His posture was that of a man who'd spent a lifetime bent over drafting tables, yet there was a quiet vitality in his movements, the kind that comes not from youth, but from purpose. The shop was impossibly small for what it contained. Every wall was covered floor to ceiling with maps, but not of Paris or Peru or the Pacific Northwest. From arrogance to humility showed a treacherous mountain range, each peak labelled with a different kind of pride, the valleys between marked with mistakes that taught rather than destroyed. The crossing from grief to remembrance depicted an archipelago of islands, denial, anger, bargaining, connected by bridges of varying strength. The distance between who you are and who you pretend to be spread across an entire wall, its topography so complex, Samuel sometimes got lost in it himself. He moved through his morning ritual, Earl Grey tea steeped for exactly 4 minutes. Curtains opened to pale light, tools checked, compass, straight edge, pens with ink he mixed himself from recipes developed over decades. Then he sat at his drafting table, a massive oak affair that had once belonged to a ship's navigator, and waited. The shop hadn't had a customer in 11 days. Before that, 3 weeks. Everyone carried the entire planet in their pocket now, compressed into pixels and algorithms. No one needed hand-drawn maps anymore, especially not maps of places that didn't exist. But Samuel came anyway, every morning, because the work wasn't finished. He was sketching preliminary lines for a new map when the bell above the door chimed. Samuel looked up, startled. The sound had become so rare, it took him a moment to remember what it meant. The woman who entered looked like she'd been walking for days. She was 35, brown-skinned, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had given up several hours ago. Professional clothes, grey slacks, wrinkled blazer, sensible shoes worn at the heels, hung on her frame like they belonged to someone else. Her eyes were empty. The particular emptiness of someone running on autopilot so long they'd forgotten they were even moving. She stood in the doorway, blinking at the shop's interior as if she'd stepped into another dimension. She began, then stopped. "I'm sorry. I think I'm in the wrong place." "Most people are," Samuel said gently. "That's usually why they end up here." She looked at the maps covering the walls, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. What is this place? A map shop. These aren't real places, aren't they? Samuel stood slowly. He walked to the nearest wall and touched a frame. This is the route from ambition to contentment. I drew it for a lawyer who realized he'd been climbing a ladder leaned against the wrong wall. Took him 7 years to make the journey, but he wrote to tell me he'd arrived. The woman stepped closer, despite herself. Her eyes caught on the map Samuel had noticed her noticing. The distance between who you are and who you pretend to be. Recognition flickered across her features like lightning. "I don't understand," she said. "What's your name?" "Maya." The answer came automatically, then, as if remembering something, "Maya Reeves." "And why are you here, Maya Reeves?" "I was walking. I had a meeting this morning. Important meeting. A pitch I've been preparing for months. Career-defining." She laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. "And I just kept walking. Past the office, past the subway. I've been walking for 3 hours, and I don't know where I'm going. And I don't know why I can't stop." Her voice caught. She looked at Samuel with something close to surrender. "I'm lost." Samuel nodded slowly. "Yes, you are. But not in the way you think." He gestured for her to follow him to the drafting table. "Tell me, Maya, when you woke up this morning, did you know where you were?" "In my apartment, Brooklyn." "And the meeting you were supposed to attend, you knew where that was?" "Of course. Corner of 5th and 42nd. I've been there 100 times. "So you're not lost in space. You know exactly where your body is supposed to be." He tapped his temple. "The question is, do you know where you are?" Maya stared at him. Then, unexpectedly, her eyes filled with tears. "No," she whispered. "I have no idea." Samuel smiled, not unkindly, but with the recognition of someone who'd seen this moment play out in countless variations in nearly 50 years. "Then sit down, Maya Reeves. Let's figure out where you are. And more importantly, let's figure out where you're trying to go." Maya sat in the worn leather chair beside Samuel's drafting table, hands twisted together in her lap. Samuel prepared tea, Earl Grey for himself, chamomile for her, and set the cup within reach. Then he returned to his seat, picked up fresh cartography paper and positioned it carefully on the drafting surface. "Before we begin," he said, "what I'm about to draw won't make sense immediately. It may not make sense for weeks or months. Some people carry my maps for years before they understand what they're looking at. I don't understand what you're offering to draw. A map of where you are and where you need to go. But you don't know anything about me." "Not yet. That's why we start with questions." He dipped his pen in ink. "Cartography always begins with questions. What's north? Where are the mountains, the dangerous passages? Most maps ask those questions about terrain. I ask them about souls." Maya picked up her teacup but didn't drink. "I don't believe in souls." "Then we'll call it something else. Your essential self. The geography of who you actually are beneath who you've been pretending to be." He looked at her directly. "Does that feel more accurate?" She flinched. "How did you know?" "The map on the wall. You recognized it immediately. Most people walk right past it." He positioned his pen above the paper. "So, first question. When did you start pretending?" Maya set down her cup, hand shaking. "That's not a fair question. Cartography rarely is, but it's necessary. Maps that lie about the terrain get people killed." Silence filled the shop. Outside, the city hummed its usual indifferent noise. Inside, there was only Maya's breathing and the tick of an old clock Samuel had never bothered to fix. "I was 23, Maya said finally, voice so quiet Samuel had to lean forward. "Fresh out of graduate school, marketing degree, student loans that would take 20 years to pay off. I interviewed at Caldwell and Sterling, and they asked me what I wanted." "What did you tell them?" "I said I wanted to build brands that mattered, create campaigns that changed how people saw the world." She laughed bitterly. "God, I actually believed that." "And what did you actually want?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Maya's face crumpled, then reassembled itself. "I wanted to make enough money so I'd never have to see that look on my mother's face again. That look that said she'd sacrificed everything so I could go to college, and I'd better make it worth it." Samuel's pen touched paper. A single dot. "So you're here," he said, marking the spot. "Call it the land of obligation." I'm not judging the terrain, Maya. I'm just noting where you started." He looked up. "What happened next?" She took a breath, then another. And slowly, haltingly, she began to talk. The first year at Caldwell in Sterling, 80-hour weeks on campaigns for products she didn't believe in, diet pills that didn't work, fast fashion that destroyed the environment, financial services that preyed on people's fear. Her first promotion, how proud her mother had been, how she had smiled through the celebration dinner while feeling like she was wearing someone else's skin. The relationship that ended because she'd missed too many dinners, too many weekends, too many moments that couldn't be rescheduled. The apartment she'd bought, the adult apartment that said she'd made it, furnished with pieces from magazines because she had no idea what she actually liked anymore. The pitch she'd been supposed to present this morning, a luxury car brand targeting young professionals. She'd stayed up until 3 a.m. perfecting the slides. "I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving," she said. and I didn't recognize the woman staring back. As she spoke, Samuel's pen moved across the paper, not with mechanical precision, but with intuition. Lines appeared, then landmarks, then entire regions taking shape beneath his ink-stained fingers. He labelled the first region the Land of Obligation, drew the path she'd taken into the Territory of Achievement, a well-paved road, heavily travelled. Marked the settlements she'd built there: career, salary, apartment, mother's pride. But then his pen traced something else, a dotted line that diverged from the main path, leading into unmarked terrain. "This," Samuel said, pointing to the dotted line, "is where you are right now. You've left the path. Your body understands something your mind hasn't accepted yet." "What?" "That the destination you've been walking toward isn't where you want to go." Maya stared at the incomplete map, her reflection ghosted in the glass-covered surface. "So what do I do? Just quit my job? Disappoint everyone? Throw away 12 years of my life?" "Those aren't cartographic questions. Those are questions about what you should do. I can't tell you that. No map can. What I can show you is where certain choices lead." He turned the paper slightly. "Here," he said, tapping a region east of the Territory of Achievement. "This is what happens if you go back. If you walk into that meeting, present your pitch, continue on the path you've been following." He'd drawn it as a coastal plain, flat, predictable, stretching toward a distant horizon. Cities dotted the landscape, each larger and more impressive than the last. Senior partner, corner office, 6 figures, industry recognition. "Looks nice," Maya said. "It is nice. For some people, it's exactly right. The terrain suits them." He paused. "But look closely." Maya leaned in. The region was meticulously detailed, but something felt empty. The cities were there, the roads clear, but something was missing. "There are no landmarks," she said slowly. "No mountains, no forests." "Nothing unexpected," Samuel finished. "Nothing wild. Nothing that requires you to navigate by feeling instead of formula. It's all been mapped before, by millions of people. Which is fine, if that's what you want." He moved his pen to the western edge of the paper, where the dotted line disappeared into blank space. "This is the unmapped country. The place you go when you leave the path everyone expects you to follow." Maya looked at the blank space. No cities, no roads, just possibility. And terror. "What's there?" she whispered. "I don't know. That's what makes it unmapped." "You must have some idea." "In nearly 50 years, I've learned that the unmapped country is different for everyone who enters it. For some, it's where they discover they actually want to teach, or paint, or build furniture. For others, it's where they learn they've been running from something they need to face." He set down his pen. The unmapped country isn't a specific place. It's the space between who you've been and who you might become. And the only way to map it is to walk through it. Maya felt something rising in her chest. Panic, or maybe hope. "But what if I make the wrong choice? What if I leave the path, and get lost and can't find my way back." "Then you'll be lost," Samuel said simply. "But you're already lost, Maya. You've been lost for years. You just kept moving forward, so you didn't have to admit it." The words should have hurt. Instead, they felt like relief. Like someone had finally named the thing she'd been feeling, but couldn't articulate. "How do you know all this?" she asked. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "Because I walked away once. And I spent 30 years wondering if I'd made a mistake." Samuel stood and moved to a locked cabinet in the back corner, partially hidden behind a standing screen. He produced a small key from his vest pocket and opened it carefully. Inside were 2 maps. He lifted one out with both hands and brought it to the drafting table. The paper was yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. The cartography was younger, less refined, but unmistakably his. "This is the first map I ever made. 1977. I was 21 years old." Maya studied it. The title read, "The Journey from Engineering to Art." "I was supposed to be a civil engineer," Samuel said. "My father's profession. His father's before him. I had a scholarship to Columbia. My degree was half finished. Then one day, in a cartography class, just an elective, the professor showed us medieval maps. Maps from before the age of exploration, when cartographers didn't just document the world, they interpreted it. They drew sea monsters in unknown waters and wrote, 'Here be dragons.'" His finger traced the edge of his old map. "I realized that's what I wanted to do. Not build bridges over rivers, but chart the rivers people carry inside them. Not calculate load-bearing walls, but understand the weight people carry in their hearts." "What did you do?" "I walked away. Told my father I was quitting the engineering program, that I wanted to study art and philosophy and cartography. Not the mathematical kind, but the interpretive kind. The kind that barely existed outside my own head." "How did he react?" Samuel smiled sadly. "He didn't speak to me for 11 years. Wrote me out of the will. Told the family I'd thrown away my future for nonsense and daydreams." "God." My mother was gentler, but I saw disappointment in her eyes every time I visited. She'd ask how the map thing was going, with that tone that made it clear she still hoped I'd come to my senses. He sat back down, hands resting on the edge of the old map. "I spent the next 3 decades here, in this shop, drawing maps for people who found their way to my door. I made almost no money. I lived in a tiny apartment with no heat in winter. I ate noodles and rice and day-old bread from the bakery down the street." "Do you regret it?" Maya asked. Samuel looked at her. "Every single day for the first 10 years. Then, every month for the next 10. Then, every once in a while, usually at 3 a.m. when doubt comes knocking." He paused. "The wondering never fully goes away, but the answer has become clearer over time." "But you said you wondered for nearly 30 years if you'd made a mistake." "I did. I wondered if I'd chosen wrong, if I'd sacrificed too much, if the unmapped country was just another name for failure. He touched the old map gently. And then I met Eleanor. He returned to the locked cabinet and carefully drew out the second map, placing it beside his own. This one dated June 14th, 2003. The title read, "From Wife and Mother to Self." "This is where I keep the maps that matter most," he said quietly. "Not many, just the ones I need to remember." She came into the shop in 2003, 51 years old, recently divorced, trying to figure out what to do with the rest of her life. I drew this for her, showed her the terrain she'd have to cross, the region of guilt, the valley of uncertainty, the mountains of rediscovery. Did it help? She carried it everywhere, brought it back every few months to show me where she'd travelled. We'd sit here, and she'd point to landmarks. I crossed through here, and it was exactly as hard as you showed. Or, I thought I'd be lost in this forest forever, but I found a path through. His eyes grew distant. We talked for hours. About maps and meaning. About the courage it takes to walk into unmapped territory. About the difference between being lost and being found. He looked at Maya directly. One day, I asked her to dinner. Not to discuss her map, just dinner. We were married 18 months later. Maya felt her throat tighten. She sounds incredible. She was. Is. He corrected himself automatically. That familiar slip people make when the dead are still present in their hearts. She died 6 years ago. Cancer. It came fast. I'm sorry. Samuel nodded. She spent 32 years walking a path that was right for her at the time. Marriage, motherhood, building a life. But then the terrain changed. The destination she'd been walking toward was reached, and suddenly she had to figure out where to go next. She didn't regret those 32 years, but she also didn't regret leaving the path when it no longer led somewhere she wanted to be. He moved to the window, looking out at evening commuters hurrying past. Time is strange. We think of it as linear, born, age, die. A straight line. But the internal landscape doesn't work that way. Sometimes a single year of walking the right path teaches you more than a decade on the wrong one. He turned back. You're 35. Let's say you live to 85. That's 50 years. If you spent 12 years walking the wrong direction, that's 24% of your life. Not insignificant, but not defining either. The question isn't whether you've wasted time. The question is, what are you going to do with the time remaining? Maya's tears spilled over, hot against cold cheeks. But I'm scared. I'm so scared of making the wrong choice. Good, Samuel said. Fear means you're about to do something that matters. Comfort is the enemy of transformation. You've been comfortable for 12 years. Well paid, well regarded, safe in your territory of achievement. And look what it's cost you. He gestured to the map on the drafting table. The unmapped country is terrifying. There's no guidebook, no guarantee you'll end up somewhere better than where you started. But here's what I know after 50 years. everyone who stays on the path they know is safe spends the rest of their life wondering, what if? And everyone who steps into the unmapped country, even if they struggle, even if they stumble, at least they know. They tried. They didn't die wondering who they might have been if they'd been braver. Maya looked at the map, at the dotted line leading into blank space. How do I know which way to go? Samuel returned to his seat, picked up his pen. You listen. Not to what you should do, or what makes sense, or what will disappoint the fewest people. You listen to the part of you that made your body walk past that meeting this morning. The part that knew, even if your mind didn't want to admit it, that you couldn't take another step in that direction. He added a few more details to the map. Small landmarks in the unmapped country. Possibilities rather than certainties. The map I'm drawing isn't permission. It's not a mandate. It's just a mirror, showing you terrain you already know exists, but have been afraid to look at directly. What you do with it, that's your journey, not mine. He set down his pen. But I'll say this. In nearly 50 years, I've never had someone come back and tell me they regretted walking into unmapped territory. I've had plenty tell me they regretted waiting so long to start. Samuel worked on Maya's map for another hour while she sat quietly, watching his hands move across the paper. Outside, the city shifted through its evening transformation. Streetlights flickering on, traffic thickening. When he finally set down his pen, the map was complete. As complete as such maps could ever be. He'd drawn the territory of achievement in meticulous detail. The career progression, the financial milestones, the comfortable predictability of a life lived according to plan. Beautiful cartography, precise and clear. But he'd also drawn the unmapped country to the west. He couldn't show her what was there, that would have been cartographic fiction, but he'd sketched possibilities. Landmarks like work that feels like purpose, and mornings you want to wake up for, and the part of yourself you forgot existed. He'd drawn challenges too. The wilderness of uncertainty, the desert of financial insecurity, the mountain range of other people's disappointment. And at the edge, where the unmapped country faded into white space, he'd written, "Beyond here, only you can map." Maya studied the map in silence. Her fingers traced the dotted line, following it from where it left the main path into unknown terrain. "It's beautiful," she said finally. "It's honest," Samuel corrected gently, which isn't always the same thing. He rolled the map carefully, tied it with a black ribbon, and handed it to her. "There's no charge," he said when she reached for her wallet. "The map is a gift. What you do with it is yours to decide." Maya held the rolled map like it might dissolve if she squeezed too hard. "What if I look at this and still don't know what to do?" "Then you wait. Carry it with you. Look at it when you need to. The right moment will come. The moment when your body and heart and mind all agree on the same direction. You'll feel it. like you felt this morning when you kept walking. Maya stood slowly, reluctantly, as if leaving the shop meant returning to the world's demands. "Can I come back, if I need to?" Samuel smiled. Everyone asks that. The answer is always yes. Though I should warn you, most people don't need to. Once you start reading the map, you learn to chart your own course. She nodded, moved toward the door, then stopped. "Samuel, did Eleanor ever finish her journey? The one on that map you drew for her?" She did. It took her 8 years. She became a therapist, went back to school at 59, opened her practice at 64. She said she wanted to help people navigate the kind of transitions she'd gone through. And was she happy? She was herself, Samuel said, which is a different kind of happiness than most people expect. Not the comfortable kind, the earned kind. The kind that comes from walking through wilderness and coming out the other side knowing you didn't take the easy path because there was a harder one that led somewhere true. Maya nodded, opened the door. The bell chimed. Evening air rushed in, carrying city smells and distant sounds. "Thank you," she said. And then she was gone, disappearing into the anonymous flow of the street, carrying her map like a secret. Samuel stood at the window and watched her go. He never knew if people followed the maps he drew. That wasn't his business. His business was showing them the terrain, not walking it for them. He returned to his drafting table, looked at the sketch he'd abandoned that morning, from certainty to wonder, and picked up his pen. There was always another map to draw. Always another lost soul who'd eventually wander through his door. He dipped his pen and continued working as night settled over the shop and the city turned itself into a constellation of lights that looked, from high enough above, almost like a map. "47 days later, the bell above Samuel's door chimed at 4:23 p.m. He looked up from the map he was drawing and saw Maya standing in the doorway. She looked different. Not dramatically, similar clothes, roughly same ponytail, but something in her posture had changed. She stood straighter, more grounded. Like someone who'd found their center of gravity after years of being off balance. "Hello, Maya," Samuel said, setting down his pen. "Hi." She stepped inside, carrying a folder thick with papers. "I wasn't sure if you'd remember me." Samuel smiled. "I remember everyone who sits in that chair. How are you?" "I'm different." She tested the word. "Both good different and complicated different." "Those usually go together." She laughed. Real laughter this time, not breaking glass. "Can I sit?" "Of course." She settled into the familiar leather chair, folder in her lap. Samuel waited, recognizing the silence of someone gathering courage. "I need to tell you what happened," Maya said finally. "After I left here." She opened the folder and pulled out the map Samuel had drawn, now worn at the edges from handling. "I walked for 3 more hours that day, still carrying this. I was afraid to open it, afraid it would tell me something I didn't want to know." She looked up. "I ended up at the Brooklyn Bridge, stood there watching sunset, watching thousands of people cross back and forth, all of them knowing exactly where they were going. And I thought, that's what I've been doing my whole life. Crossing bridges other people built, following paths other people mapped. She unfolded the map on Samuel's desk. I opened it right there. People probably thought I was insane, standing there crying over a hand-drawn map that clearly wasn't of New York. Her finger traced the territory of achievement. I could see my whole future here. The promotions, the corner office, the slow, comfortable march toward retirement. And here, she touched the unmapped country. Just blank. Terrifying. But also, Samuel said, reading what she hadn't said yet, also calling to me. Like a voice I'd been ignoring for so long I'd forgotten it existed. She pulled out more papers. A phone bill with a highlighted section, a 4-hour, 17-minute call. I called my mother that night, told her everything. About the pitch, the walking, finding your shop. About how I'd been pretending to be someone I wasn't for 12 years. How did she respond? Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. She said, "I know, baby. I've known for years. I was just waiting for you to know it too." Samuel felt something catch in his throat. She told me she never wanted me to sacrifice myself for her pride. That she worked hard so I could have choices, not obligations. Maya wiped her eyes. She said she didn't raise me to be successful at being someone else. Wise woman. Maya pulled out a resignation letter dated 3 days after her visit. I quit my job, gave them 4 weeks' notice, worked to transition my projects, and walked out for the last time on a Tuesday afternoon. How did it feel? Terrifying. Like jumping off a cliff. Like I'd set fire to 12 years of my life. She paused. And also like I could finally breathe properly for the first time since I was 23. She spread more papers across the desk, evidence of 47 days in unmapped territory. A journal entry. Woke at 10 a.m. today and didn't feel guilty. Spent 3 hours writing. Not work writing, just thoughts, ideas, things I've wanted to say for years. A photograph. Maya at a community garden in Queens, dirt under her fingernails, smiling. A course registration. Introduction to Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems at NYU. Notes from volunteer shifts at a food co-op in Brooklyn. Inventory management, but also conversations with farmers. Scribbled ideas about connecting consumers to food sources. A bank statement showing her savings, smaller than before, but substantial. A handwritten note beside it. Living on 50% of what I used to make. Turns out I don't need the apartment that impressed people I didn't like. Samuel studied each piece, recognizing the topography of transformation. This was what the unmapped country looked like when someone actually walked into it. Messy, uncertain, unmistakably alive. "You've travelled far," he said. "I have." She pulled out one final paper, a sketch, rough and amateurish, but recognisable as cartography. "I've been trying to map where I've been, where I'm going. It's nothing like yours. I have no talent for this.
but I needed to see it. Samuel examined her sketch. It was crude, yes, but it showed something essential. Maya had learned that mapping wasn't about perfect draftsmanship. It was about honest observation. "This is good work," he said sincerely. "It's terrible," Maya laughed. "But it's mine. That's what matters, right?"
She gathered her papers, returned them to the folder, but left Samuel's original map on the desk. "I came back because I wanted to tell you something. That map, it saved my life. Not in the dramatic way, but in the real way. You showed me I had a choice, that the path I was on wasn't the only path." Samuel nodded slowly. "But I also came back to ask you something." She leaned forward. "Why are you still here? In this shop that barely anyone visits, drawing maps for people who mostly don't even know they need them. What's your question?" "Are you happy? You gave up everything. Your father's approval, financial security, the normal life. Was it worth it?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "Happiness is the wrong word," he said finally. "It's too simple. Like asking if a map is happy." "Then what's the right word?" Samuel stood, moved to his wall of maps, ran his fingers along frames containing nearly 50 years of work. "Purpose. I have purpose. I wake up every morning and do the work I was meant to do. Some days no one comes. Some days the work feels futile." He turned back. "But then someone like you walks through that door. And 47 days later you come back and show me the map helped you find your way. And in that moment, I know with absolute certainty that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing." His eyes held hers. "So was it worth it? Giving up my father's approval, the money, the conventional success?" He smiled. "Every single day. Because this work matters. And it's mine. And I'd rather live one real life than spend 80 years pretending to be someone else." Maya sat in silence, absorbing his words. Outside, afternoon surrendered to evening. "Can I show you something?" she asked. She pulled out her iPhone, navigated to a website, and handed it to Samuel. The homepage showed a simple design, a compass rose, and beneath it, "Lost and Found, Cartography for Life Transitions." "I built this last week," Maya said. "A directory. A resource site for people going through major life transitions, career changes, divorces, losses. Any moment when someone feels lost and needs help finding their way." Samuel scrolled. Articles about navigating change, resources for different transitions, a forum where people could share journeys. And there, prominently featured, was a section titled Mapmakers, a directory of therapists, coaches, counsellors, and one cartographer. He clicked the link and found his own listing, ready but not yet live. Samuel Cartwright, traditional cartographer, specialising in maps of internal terrain for people navigating unmapped territory. He looked up, startled. "I found 7 other people who'd been to your shop," Maya said. "They all said the same thing, that your maps helped them find their way. So I thought, maybe other people need to know you exist." Maybe there are hundreds of people out there who would come to your door if they knew it was here. Samuel stared at the listing, emotions moving through him like weather. I don't have a website, or a phone that isn't a landline. I know, that's why I built you one. She tapped the screen, showing a simple page with his name, a description, a contact form. Nothing complicated, just enough so people can find you. She looked at him carefully. I know you're not doing this for recognition, but Samuel, you're 69 years old. How many more years do you have? 15? 20? And how many people might need what you offer, but never find you because they don't know to look? Samuel felt something crack open in his chest, not painful, but tender. Why would you do this? You barely know me. Because you gave me a map when I needed one most. And because I spent 12 years using my skills to sell things that don't matter. I'd like to spend the next 40 helping people find things that do. She reached across the desk, squeezed his hand briefly. You don't have to say yes. It's your choice. It's always your choice. But I wanted to offer, to give you the same thing you gave me. A possibility you might not have seen on your own. Samuel looked at the website again, at his name on the screen, at the idea that his work, the quiet, private, nearly invisible work he'd been doing for 50 years, might reach beyond the handful of people who stumbled through his door by accident. I need to think about it, he said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. Maya stood, preparing to leave. Everything's ready to go live whenever you say the word. Or never, if that's what you choose. She moved toward the door, then paused. Samuel? One more thing. She turned back. In all your years of drawing maps, have you ever drawn one for yourself? The question struck home. Samuel opened his mouth to answer, then realized he couldn't. Because the truth was, no. In nearly 50 years of cartography, he'd drawn maps for hundreds of people navigating thousands of journeys. But he'd never drawn one for himself. That's what I thought, Maya said gently. Maybe it's time. The bell chimed as she left. Samuel sat alone in the gathering dusk, surrounded by maps of other people's journeys, and wondered, for the first time in decades, where his own path might lead next. Three weeks later, on a Monday morning that felt like any other, Samuel Cartwright did something he'd never done in 48 years of running his shop. He put a sign in the window. It read, "The Cartographer is accepting new clients. Visit lostfoundmaps.com or call for appointments." Below it, handwritten on a smaller card, "Walk-ins still welcome." He'd called Maya the night before, told her yes, told her to activate the listing, make the website live, let people find him if they needed to find him. "Are you sure?" she'd asked. Samuel had looked around his shop, at the maps covering every wall, at the drafting table where he'd spent nearly half a century translating invisible geography into visible form, at the worn leather chair where hundreds of lost souls had sat seeking direction, No, he'd said honestly. But if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that certainty is overrated. Fear means you're about to do something that matters. Maya had laughed. He could hear the recognition in it, his own words offered back to him. When did you remember that? When someone walked through my door 47 days ago and reminded me that I'd been standing still for 6 years. That I'd been so busy showing others their terrain, I'd forgotten to examine my own. He'd paused, looking at the preliminary sketch he'd been working on for the past 3 weeks. His own map, finally. Rougher, more uncertain, but unmistakably his. The title read, "The Country of What Comes Next." I drew a map, he'd told Maya. For myself. Finally. And I'm terrified. Which is how I know it's the right choice. Now, standing in his shop on this Monday morning, Samuel looked at the sign in the window and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not happiness. That word was still too simple. Purpose, yes. And something else. Anticipation. The phone rang. The old landline he'd had since 1977. He picked it up. Cartwright Maps? Hello? A woman's voice, uncertain. I've found your website. I'm not sure if this is right, but I'm lost. Not in the usual way. I know where I am physically, but I don't know where I'm going. Does that make sense? Samuel smiled, settling into his chair, reaching for a fresh sheet of cartography paper. Yes, he said. That makes perfect sense. And you've come to the right place. He dipped his pen in ink. Let's start with a question, he said. What makes you think you're lost? Outside, morning light filtered through the shop windows, illuminating decades of cartography. Maps of journeys taken, terrain crossed, destinations reached or abandoned. For the first time in 6 years, Samuel Cartwright wasn't just showing others the way. He was walking it himself. One step, one choice, one honest line at a time.